Good morning and welcome to The Truth is Funny. I'm so honored to be Colette's guest host every third Wednesday of the month. This morning I have, for possibly the third or fourth time, a dear friend and a woman that is just filled with so much wisdom as our guest, Lisa Reinhardt. And we're so excited to move forward and to be talking about the topic of caregiving and all of the different facets that are available to us in this field that we're all facing in the current climate of the world. But what I love is Lisa's inclination to explore this as an additional form of transformation that we can all tap into as we engage in what so many of us do, whether we're mothers or taking care of the elderly or taking care of pets or whatever it might be, any way that this role of caregiving shows up. So my intention on this show is to provide information, science, experiences, and stories to serve as a foundation for the ever-evolving emergence of your true nature. We hope to inspire you. The topics that we choose are of this vibration and this frequency, that we touch on areas of life that offer these opportunities for expansion. We invite you to call in live to join us, comments, questions, shares, you name it, 1-800-930-2819. And with no further ado, I would like to welcome the guest, Lisa Reinhardt. Thank you so much for taking an hour out of your day again to join us on this show.
Oh, thank you, Karen. No, totally my pleasure. I mean, I'd show up just for the introduction. You're so flattering every time you introduce me.
It's so hard. The longer I do this work to put things into words, right? You know, how I really feel. And I so enjoy exploring any topic with you as far as the insights that arise and that blend with the experiences that you have had in your life. And this show topic, believe it or not, was an inspiration from a guest who called in and was expressing, you know, at the end of our last show together, some, I don't even know what the proper word would be, you know, insight. She was looking for insight about her difficulties and challenges in her newfound role as a caregiver. And I forget if it was a caregiver of a parent. But I just remember the topic being caregiver. So if you're out there, feel free to call in, because here we are. This show is an inspiration of yours. And one of the things that I've been most inspired about as a nurse is being a friend of Lisa's and, you know, looking to her as a mentor all the time, are her continued over the last 3 or 4 years, from retreats that I've gone on where she was leading to lots of different platforms, hearing her stories of caring for her elderly, I'm not sure what I meant by that, but her parents, which of course are going to be older than I am, and the inspiring stories that come out of it that are filled with laughter, but also opportunity. And so here we are, you know, caregiving.
Yeah.
Just when you say the word, it depends on what your experiences are, whether that's something that might light you up or whether that's something that you associate with a burden. And I will be the first to admit that I struggle with seeing that as a burden. I think my life as a nurse started to filter and clog that lens with a sense of burden, you know, whether it be from the night shifts or from feeling that I had too many patients to take care of, feeling, you know, that I couldn't possibly give each person what they needed. And so in the spirit of connecting with how I resonated with that caller, let's just start with that, you know, that, you know, what do we do or not do? How do we explore this common frustration that many of us can experience when we are engaged in the role of caregiver?
Yeah, that's a really good point, because I realized several years in, I think, that the frustration for me arose out of when I felt like I had to be doing something other than being. And that my role as a caregiver was so much more fulfilling and free when I realized that being was what I was called to do. And, you know, I realized, boy, there are so many things that factor into that, and things that might present obstacles to that. Like, as you say, as a nurse, like having too many people to care for. Wow, I can't even imagine. You know, I had my two parents at one point, or for several years. And then when things got more intense with my dad and he started receiving hospice care, then someone from home came to help me so that there would be one-on-one help.
Yeah.
But I realized even, and then I would watch her as well, and I would say, oh, you know, when we feel like we have to get something done, that's when the frustration arises, because when we're present in every moment, it's not like we're not getting stuff done. There's a ton of stuff that gets done, right? But it's that shift into I'm present with a person, I'm present in the space, I'm not feeling any kind of extraneous ideas about, you know, my value is if I accomplish X, Y, and Z. It's not about that. It's about your, you know, your value is as a human being holding the space of compassion, of safety, of presence. And, you know, in some ways it might seem like a luxury, and in a lot of ways it is. But it's in the moment to moment awareness and just expansion and holding of that space that all of the magic happens. All of the, you know, like the deep exchanges happen. All of the, you know, it's so funny because of, you know, in caregiving, there is a lot of physical work. And it's just held so much better in that space of surrendering to being rather than the go, 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 do that rules most of our lives.
Yeah. And I would say that for me, nursing was, you know, there was day shift, which had a certain patient nurse ratio. Then there was evening shift, and then there was night shift, which I inherently was drawn to night shift because even though I had more patients, it was quiet. And there were a lot more, I wouldn't have been able to articulate this at the time, right? But there was a lot more of that, just being with someone. And I think of even connecting with you in this space, you know, we're on a radio show, but there is this sense of just, well, I think what you call it, beingness, that you feel seen and heard without needing to be anything else other than what you are, just by speaking with you, you know, just being in this container. And it reminds me that that's something I can cultivate as well. And I'm about to say, who, you know, most people are like, okay, I have this problem. What are the 6 steps to get it better? What if it's just one, you know, beingness? What's it like to be present with yourself? And how amazingly effective when someone like you, who's cultivated the art of being present, it effortlessly ripples out to whoever comes in contact with it, which is the exact opposite of doing.
Yeah, it's elusive to describe, but you did an amazing job of describing it. And it's all in the doing, and it's all, I mean, even if we're not practiced at it, the practice is in one moment. You know, it's just like, oh, we can do it in this moment. It doesn't rely on 10 years of having done it. It just relies on this one moment. You know, it reminds me of that old Chinese expression, the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago, and the second time is now. And I thought one day, I said, no, that's totally wrong. The only time is now.
Yeah.
And that frees us from this feeling of guilt and like, oh, I'm not doing it right. And I haven't, you know, there's so much, for me personally, there was so much of that around caregiving, around doing it right, fear of not doing it right, you know, and stress about, am I getting it right? And part of that is because it's really triggering to see our loved ones suffer. It's really hard. We want to get it right. We want to remove that suffering. And yet to know that because they're suffering doesn't mean that you're doing a bad job. Doesn't mean you're doing it wrong.
Ooh, that is so profound. because they're suffering doesn't mean you're doing a bad job. Because I think, in medicine, one of the big sort of divides or dividing moments in my life was coming to terms with feeling or observing that medicine sees death as a failure. In my opinion, I need to put that in my opinion. I don't know, that is just something that I adopted after my years in it, that there was this idea that death was something to be avoided at all costs. And to the point where that was one of the points that had me make a direct right turn and say, I want to explore this in a different way, because as I sat with people who were dying more and more, I slowly became aware that it could be beautiful.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
And wanted to explore being able to, what I used to think was, offer people what they needed to make it beautiful. But almost what I'm opening to from what you're saying is, maybe there's nothing we need to do, but rather sit with that person, and through the art and gift of presence, they'll guide us.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember earlier this year, my dad was 94 years old, and he was in excellent health his whole life, really beautifully excellent health. And he got sick, and he didn't know how to handle being sick, because he'd never been sick really, since maybe the 40s, coming back from the war, he got jaundice. And he was perplexed by it, and he was confused by it. And he had no fear of death. He's 94 years old. He knows how the story ends. And,
that's great.
And so for him, death was not a failure. It's like, right. But not being able to die on his terms, he was really stressed about that. And I just had to tell him one day. I said, Dad, I said, I think you're dying, and you're doing a really good job. You're doing a beautiful job. It's all going to work out perfectly. You don't have to worry.
Want to well up. I mean, who would have ever thought to tell someone you're doing a really good job at dying? I mean, this is sort of humorous, but aren't we all, like, on some level dying?
Yeah, exactly. And then depending on, how you believe things. I mean, I'm from a tradition where we feel like we've died many times, right? There's a whole history of reincarnation, and doing some of my own deeper work, I found a part of myself that felt like I had failed infinite times because I have died so many times. And when you uncover that part that feels like death was a failure, I mean, you're tapping into something real, right? It's like, and to uncover that, I mean, there's something a little bit comic about it.
Right, it is. And it is, like, particularly as a nurse, we do make humor out of everything, right? Because we're facing dying on a regular basis. We're all, many of them die. So you ultimately do find light in it, in a sense, but then there's other times that it hits you so heavy and so hard.
Right. And, I mean, I admit it's much easier for me because my dad was 94. Right. Like, oh my goodness, I am so lucky that I had 57 years of having him as my father, and such a beautiful human being. And he was ready, like, it's totally, I can't even imagine if it was, someone much younger who wasn't in that same position.
So when you were in those moments where the tasks felt too much, and you felt that you weren't doing enough, and you felt that other part, or that other storyline winning. Yeah. Isn't everything a battle? Let's call it winning. I don't know. We all seem to do. The part of you that believed everything was beautiful and perfect was out to lunch for the moment, and you were living with the part of you that was like, you are not good enough. This is too much. How long is this going to be? I can't keep up. But I shouldn't be making up the stories in your head, but those are my own stories and moments, my own lines.
I've heard those stories before.
What do you, give us a 6-step process? No, what do you do? What is your, so beingness,
Well, I think the thing that really it gave me the most practice in the last couple of years, that's been the most help for me, is the practice of self-compassion. The practice of actually hearing that part that is, screaming or crying or telling those stories and saying, oh my God, sister, I hear you. Like, honey, it's hard. You're not kidding. Like you're in deep here. And in finding that, that kind of well of compassion, that lake of compassion that can gather up this part that needs to be heard. I'm not saying it's easy. It's not easy in those moments, but just gathering it up like a child and giving her a hug and saying, oh my goodness, like, yes, you are doing all you can do. And if you lose your shit, that happens. Think back to being a mother, like, of younger children, right? It's like, it happens, even with your best intentions, those moments happen. And so it happens too when you're dealing with 90-something-year-olds. And then part of you is like, I can't believe I just lost it,
I've heard my son say to me, but it's just the dishes, Mom.
Yeah, exactly.
In this moment, it was just the dishes. Yeah.
But finding, getting skilled at finding that kind of more open, more spacious, more that big part that can gather up that little part, that doesn't have to shut that part in the closet and say, I'm so embarrassed because you lost it at your mother. Like, no, it's like, gather it up and say, I hear you. I totally get it. I understand it's hard. And just instead turn it into a moment of just really seeping everything with compassion. And I found that to be really transformational in both the moment, and then later on, I find that it changes how often those things occur or how quickly I can find that space again, because that for me is the space of, being able to hold it all.
Yeah. That perhaps even that part that's losing it has value too.
Yeah.
Which I guess is that definition of wholeness, which is really everything, right? Like the dark and the light, the unintegrated parts that we've been sort of conditioned to judge, the part that says I'm not good enough, the part that says I can't do this, the part that says this is too much, and I personally struggle most with the one that says I can't do this, the one, or I'm not doing it good enough, that I need to do more. And this practice of doing less is a big struggle for me.
Well, and you can even take that well of compassion and address that part that thinks it should do more and say, like, oh, honey, like, that is such a beautiful, pure intention. Like, I totally appreciate, the instinct in you that wants to wipe away all the suffering, that wants to comfort on every level. That's so beautiful, and I so appreciate it. And, because she's suffering doesn't mean that you're not doing a good job. It is the nature of life for there to be suffering. No one can erase that. And at the same time, you don't need her not to suffer in order to be a good daughter.
I think about that suffering piece is, I may have mentioned this before, but it comes up as, I was there in the late 80s, early 90s in the hospital when the pain management team was about making sure nobody ever felt any pain ever again. And everyone before and after surgery was put on a cocktail of anti-inflammatories and some sort of a narcotic to make sure they never had pain. And fast forward to me being pregnant with my first child, and the surgeon I worked with, saying, because I was exploring, as I was learning towards the end of it, wanting to have natural childbirth, and him saying, why would you ever want to put yourself through that pain? And when I look back at my childbirth, I ended up having an epidural with the first one. I didn't with the second and third. But those challenging experiences ignited a part of me I didn't even know existed. you know, a part of me that believes I can do it, a part of me that, like, when, excuse me, the sugar honey iced tea hits the fan, she comes alive, you know. And I hadn't really met her before those experiences, you know, and I don't think I ever had that deep sense of accomplishment that I felt. And I don't even know if accomplishment, but survival, whatever it might be. It wasn't like I did it perfect in any way, but there was this sense of the parts of us that may not reveal themselves will show up when we're like at the brink of what we think we cannot do anymore.
Right. I heard a great quote the other day too, and it was, "We've made it through 100% of our hardest days."
Look, my mind goes blank. What?
meaning that, you know, all of the things that we fear, all of the things that were so challenging, all the things that pushed us to the edge, we've made it through 100% of all
See,
of them.
look, I couldn't even, wow, that's so funny. You had to say it slightly different for me to even,
Mm-hmm.
because that a little part of me was like, there's no way it's over, all the hard parts. How dare you say it? I mean, that was like what my head was saying, right? Like, that couldn't possibly be true. But we have made it through 100%.
Yeah. Oh, I see what you say. Yeah. Yeah. And that's interesting too, because when we look back, very often it's all of the things that we would never have chosen are the things that really bring out the depth of the qualities that we end up really valuing.
Wow.
And so to anesthetize everything, which is kind of the, you know, the trend.
Yeah.
Is robbing us of the ability to know ourselves deeply, develop ourselves deeply, understand ourselves deeply, trust ourselves deeply.
Ooh, yeah.
Right? We don't need necessarily help from the outside. We don't need that anesthesia in whatever form, you know, and I'm not just talking about medically. What if we didn't have the anesthesia of television, of entertainment, of Hollywood, of you know,
social media,
substances, you know,
yeah,
we might discover things that we would never have known.
Well, I'm excited to come back after the break and continue on with, you know, just this idea of anesthesia and this idea of embracing the charge, and also diving in a little bit. You know, we spoke in the break about some areas that some more recent news that brings up more charged topics around the idea of caregiving and ways that we can support ourselves and others in life. So please feel free to call in 1-800-930-2819. And otherwise, we will be back right after the break. The music's going in and out. But I'm going to talk anyway, because I'm not sure if that's my role or not. But okay, you are listening to The Truth is Funny on Transformation Talk Radio. This is a live show that is airing. If you are listening to the podcast, thank you so much for joining in. My guest today is Lisa Reinhardt, and a very powerful meditation teacher filled with lots and lots of wisdom. And we are exploring the topic of caregiving as a road and path for transformation. Lisa, would you share your contact information with the community?
You can find me over at my company's website. That's called Wei of Chocolate, W-E-I, Wei of Chocolate.com. And you can write to me there. There's an email address on the website. And that's where we use chocolate as a tool for meditation and for a way to find our place in the present moment. It's only as far away as a piece of chocolate.
I love that. She's often is quoted saying a subversive way to bring meditation into the world. And Lisa and I have spoken before. And so if you check out my website, KarenBetten.com, you can find the recordings of the other shows that we've done, learning about her incredible path to founding her chocolate company and her years of studying meditation in Tibet, and what that, you know, how that led her to the founding of her amazing company. and many other explorations that we've gone into together. So please contact her if you have any questions, or finding yourself these beautiful little pieces of chocolate that offer you just that perfect amount of 2 to 3 minute break to connect in with yourself. They're all the exact right size to last about 2 to 3 minutes, and it can be very transformational. And we're going to do a meditation at the end of this show. Not we, Lisa's going to do it and lead it, which would be a great opportunity if you're listening in live to have your chocolate near you that you can put in your mouth right before she starts, and she'll lead us on a 2 to 3 minute meditation. So we were talking in the break a little bit about pressing my buttons, your buttons, her buttons, people pressing our buttons. And we were laughing, but also saying about how parents in particular, when caring for our parents, our buttons can be triggered. And most of us know what that means, right? I think of kind of crazy woman like me actually getting close to losing it when my buttons are triggered. Lisa, tell us, in the years that you've been caring for your parents and you moved to Florida to take care of them, tell us, maybe once, maybe twice you had your buttons triggered? Probably that's it.
Is that every hour or every day?
Depending on the day or the week or the month.
Well, it's funny because I think it's one of the gifts, actually, of having the opportunity to care for our parents. You know, it's those things that we wouldn't choose.
Do tell me more, because even I'm thinking about a trigger with my parent, and I'm like, how dare you tell me that was a gift? That was torture. No.
But those things that we don't choose are the things that can actually help us the most sometimes. And the very fact that the trigger arises, like, I mean, first of all, to go back, it's like the time with our parents, you know, at our stage in life, we know that it's limited time, right? We know, like I said earlier, we know how the story ends. And so there's a kind of poignancy and a specialness to that time that's really bittersweet. And at the same time, you know, these things will arise. And like I say, it's the gift of that time that it's like having been through everything else, now we get to this little review period, and it's like, did we weed out all of those things that we really wanted to unravel and eliminate from ourselves, right? Because I look at my mom, she's 92 years old. There's nothing that I can say or do that's going to change that woman now. I can give that.
Does that mean you gave up on trying to change her? That's the part that I'm not so good at either, right? Like there I go again, trying to change them. Why do I think they need to be different than they are?
I know, isn't it interesting? And so when the trigger happens, and in that moment I feel like that, then I know, oh, that's my opportunity to ask, that thing that she's doing that makes me insane, where am I doing that in my life? I don't ask if I'm doing it, because it's a given that if it triggers me, I'm resonating. So that means that I am doing it. The question is where, and am I willing yet to admit it? So just gently asking the question, where am I doing that?
Do you ask it out loud, this question?
I don't have the answer right away. It's not like I have to figure it out. I don't have to do something again. It's more like that. There's so much power in questions alone. But to simply be willing to ask the question means I'm willing to look at myself, means I'm willing that when the answer does filter up, I'm willing to see it, consider it, and again, go back to what we spoke of earlier, is that's when I can take that well of compassion and gather in that part and see what happens when I apply compassion instead of judgment, when I apply welcoming and acceptance rather than suppression and denial. And
right, and suppression and denial, right, could also show up as blame. Not that I have any experience in that at all.
I love finding blame. Like, I hear blame in my head every day, and every time I do, I'm like, oh, I got another one. There's another one. Because for me, blame is a showstopper. Like, it's when I'm in blame, I'm not in growth. I'm not in transformation. And so when I can see and recognize and acknowledge, like admit that I'm in blame, I have the opportunity to free it in that moment. I have the opportunity to strengthen my habit of choosing to take responsibility and move away from, you know, even a subtle kind of victimhood, and release the blame. Because I feel like that's one of the most expedient paths to awakening, is to be able to identify, see, acknowledge, accept, unravel, blame.
And do you think just observing it starts to change it?
It does. It does. It's like when you shine a light on something, you know, it can, self-liberate.
So powerful. And I think that's there's lots of words for that, right? The pause, the pivot, here's my term. Your line from last time we were together. Sometimes waiting is really divine procrastination. So it's like, if you're in that trigger and you're in that moment, perhaps pausing, pivoting, or I'm just going to say it again, sometimes waiting is really divine procrastination. I'm so in love with that line. I feel like as a doer, as a habitualized doer, that is, and this may not be for everyone, right? In that moment, right? Because sometimes we can't control what happens, right? We're just in full reaction. So there's no pausing and pivoting, and that's perfectly fine too. But
pausing, like the tool that I use the most is noticing the space in the room. Like if you're with another person, the trigger arises, there's tension. If I can remember to see the space rather than just fixate on, the reaction, the emotion, the perceived wrong, whatever, and then I open it up and suddenly I see there's space all around us. And there's something about that allows there to be that divine procrastination, allows there to be that moment where maybe that tension can simply fall to the ground or dissolve.
How do you visualize space? So you say, this might be a crazy question, but you said, I see the space. I allow myself to see the space. How does space feel or show up or look like to you?
Well, if I ask you right now, what's the biggest thing in your room? Tell me what's the biggest thing in your room. And it could be.
I thought of was my head.
Typically it'd be like, the desk, the bed is in the dresser's pretty long, the credenza, we got the bookshelf, And then if I said, what? But you're missing the biggest thing in the room. The biggest thing in the room is space. And it just flips our perspective in a moment. It's like, instead of being hooked on object, 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 it's like, oh, wow.
I love that. The biggest thing in the room is space, always, right? And even quantum physics will take that a whole nother level and say, even the things you think from a quantum perspective actually have mass and weight. When it gets down to it, they're just energy.
Exactly.
And potential, right? So you're just, wow, looking at it and tuning in from a completely different perspective, which in that moment can shift it.
Hugely powerful. And I would say, practice that as often as you can. Like when you're waiting in line at the grocery store, when you're, driving, when you're
tuning into the space. Yeah. Is that
flipping back and forth?
Noticing the space.
I was just looking at objects. What happens if I look at what holds objects and just flip back and forth so that you get really fluent in that? Really powerful.
I'm really having a moment here. I love that. And it's so simple and it's always with you, right?
Exactly. And the biggest thing is, like, for us doers, it means you're never wasting time. Because if you're forced to be in a certain place, like waiting in line, oh my God, you can do that. And then every moment is so powerful, meaningful. It's like you're putting drops in the bucket of your awakening. Those drops don't evaporate, they just accumulate. So go ahead and put some more drops in that bucket. And it's like, it makes everything meaningful to have that kind of a really simple practice.
Well, I think it's believe it or not, time for another break. And I want to explore, if you're willing, this idea of awakening. What is that? What does it mean to you? What could it mean to others? And then we'll end with the meditation of that has a theme of caregiving, and wherever else we take this. But I think awakening has many different charges in the world, and I love to hear your perspective on it, because even your perspective on space alone is mind-blowingly powerful. So I can't wait to hear your perspective on awakening. Okay, so you are here with Truth is Funny, and my guest is Lisa Reinhardt, and you can call in with questions, comments, shares, 800-930-2819, and we'll be right back. Hello and welcome back. We are live on the radio with guest Lisa Reinhardt, speaking about the transformational opportunities in caregiving, in making space. And it's been, I feel so relaxed right now. I'm having a hard time maintaining the structure of what comes next, because this practice of tuning into the space is so powerful and so simple, and again, available to us anytime. So we were left with one last question, which all my mind keeps saying is, what is enlightenment? Which was not what the question was. The question was, right? What is,
Awakening.
help me out, awakening, right? Isn't it funny that the only word I can attach to right now is enlightenment? So, but awakening, I mean, maybe they're different, maybe they're the same.
Yeah,
Tell us.
Call it all kinds of things. I mean, I think it helps to not kind of codify it in like a real, like concretize it. You don't need to. But knowing that it is the move toward uncovering our full potential and unburdening, like discovering, like the idea is we don't have to go out there and learn something new, really accumulate something, attain something. It's not that do kind of activity. It's in many ways, it's an unpeeling, it's an unraveling, it's an unlearning, because at our very nature, we are all awakened. Our very nature is enlightenment. And so right now it's like the sky being covered with clouds, right? And for most people, personally, we fixate on the weather, right? And the weather is temporary. And when the clouds blow away, the sky is still there. The sky is vast and unstainable, in the same way that is our true nature, to have that nature of enlightenment, of awakening, of clarity, of compassion. Like, it's not empty, it's not void, it's full of qualities, like these amazing qualities that we know at our core, the compassion, the insight, the clarity, the love in their purest state. That is what we're made of. And so
I heard when you say do, I heard arise, arise, arise. Almost as like the opposite for me of, this idea that I need to learn how to do this right is being replaced with creating an opportunity to allow my own wisdom to arise, 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 as I don't know, maybe a possible polar opposite to the do mantra that seems to be the one that is my go-to strategy whenever feeling stress. But maybe I could, bring in this mantra of arise, but which inherently says there's a wisdom in all of us.
Yes. Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Which is as mind-blowing as anything, because I think there's a bit of an indoctrination in our formal educational systems that say we need to learn. And I remember the first time I heard, that's really other people's views of the world, that is what we already know. And while that may have value, does it have value that supersedes our own internal wisdom?
That's a huge question. That's a really important question.
And I think when you talk about the space, we all can experience, when you connect to the space, the ease that comes over the body mind.
Yeah.
That release, that my shoulders drop, I feel more comfortable. And that alone, I now have the pathways to recognize as valuable and worthy and what I want to live more in.
Right. And one of the most powerful components, or it's not even the right word, is that spaciousness is related to connection.
Mm.
I mean, one of the most fundamental truths of existence is that we are all connected. And when all of those other, like when we see the objects, what we're seeing is differentiation. I see cup, I see computer, I see window. We're seeing differentiation. When we see space, we're seeing what unites us. Space has no boundary or edge. I'm here in space, you're there 3,000 miles away in space. We're connected by the same space. Space is a uniter. And connection is one of the fundamental truths of who we are.
I can only
And that's
read
why
that.
it feels so good.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so valuable now. Because in this moment in time, there are many things at work that are either have the intention, I don't know, but they have the result of breaking a connection. I mean, we spoke at one point during the break about, I saw a figure the other day that in the last 30 days, 25% of young adults have considered suicide. And that really made me start to, look like what's happening. And it's the breaking of connection, because connection is our fundamental truth. So if people get disconnected from our fundamental truths, then that's where depression arises, anxiety arises. All of these things happen when we're out of alignment with fundamental truth.
Because we're believing in the separation.
Right. And so whatever practices that we can give people, whatever reminders we can give people that we are fundamentally connected is so valuable. And that all of the things that are getting in the way of connection, like not seeing most of someone's face. I read the other day, there's 21 subtle facial expressions that inform our nonverbal communication that most of us are not seeing anymore in a public place. And so, and the distancing, they say that your energetic field goes out about 6 feet.
Right, in front of you and behind you, right? Yeah.
And so if circumstances, and that's another topic about intention or not, are creating breaks in connection, then we have to make an extra effort. Like we have to remember, remind, practice, and acknowledge that connection is a fundamental component of our human existence. And that even if these external things are blocking it, they don't change the fundamental truth that we are all connected. And we can overcome all of that through meditation, through these practices.
So with no further ado, are you ready to lead us in a 2 to 3 minute, little meditation to perhaps enhance connection? I can't even, I feel so connected right now. I feel no longer to any further introduction. So go ahead.
So a meditation like this you can do with or without chocolate. Chocolate is sometimes great if you have trouble, quote unquote, meditating. Then chocolate's a wonderful thing to let it melt in your mouth. But even without chocolate, if you can sit wherever you're sitting and just for a moment feel the connection, the physical connection between the base of your spine, your seat, your bottom, feel where it's touching the chair, the earth, the cushion, whatever. And so you feel your physical circumstances. You feel your shoulders in space. Maybe they open a little bit. You feel your hands in your lap. You feel your chin and you might tuck it a little bit. You feel your eyes. You can close them or you can leave them open but looking down. You feel your tongue touch the tip of your palate right behind your teeth. And this gets you back into your body so that you can feel all of these things. And then you can locate the breath or the piece of chocolate. And simply feel how that feels to breathe in and breathe out. And then breathe in and breathe out. And then notice the gap in between the two, that there's a moment of changing direction that's much like as a child when you're on a swing and you swing all the way up and you change direction and you swing all the way back. And that moment of weightlessness where you change direction on the swing is like that moment between the in-breath and the out-breath that gives you a taste of freedom, a taste of spaciousness. And in that moment of freedom and spaciousness, you can know that you're connected to all of the spaciousness. The space in front of you and behind you, above you and to the sides. And that space has no edge or boundary. And it connects you to your loved ones. It touches them on the other side. It touches you on this side. And we're all contained within this. For a moment, think of it as a sphere of spaciousness. We can extend out limitlessly in all directions. It can even take into account the entire world that we're held in this globe of spaciousness and connection. And know that that's available to you at any moment. You can explore it more deeply in your own time.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you so much for joining us again. I know this will not be the last time because I think we already started to work with our next topic, if you're willing. I love exploring. I love that I feel more relaxed after doing a radio show with you to the point where I forget my role. But we are back next month. I am back next month with another guest. I look forward to bringing Lisa back on another time. Can you again give us, what is your website?
Wei of Chocolate, WEI of chocolate.com. You can find me there. There's also Wei Wisdom. If you like meditations, go to weiwisdom.com, and there's some recorded meditations there.
Fabulous. And this will be on KarenBetten.com, the recording of this, which I will also give a link to Lisa, and it's also on transformationtalkradio.com and truthisfunny.com. So thank you so much to our beautiful audience, to Zach, to Lisa. It is always such a beautiful exploration, and we wouldn't be here without this amazing community. And I look forward to exploring any questions that may arise that are available. You can post them on the comments on the website. You can email Lisa, you can email me, and we see you all next time. Any last words?
Oh, it's so awesome. It's wonderful to be with you.
Thank you, Lisa. All right, till next time. Thank you again. Bye-bye.